Hello, welcome back to Ink and Fig. My name is Alex, and today we are doing my July reading wrap-up. I can't believe that the month is over already. I say this every month, but time is just running away from me in a way that is frankly alarming. In that time that is running away from us so desperately, I have actually done some reading, and I'm quite proud of that, to be honest with you, because I have done more reading than I was expecting to this month. I read a whole extra book that wasn't even on my list, and I finished the two books that have been plaguing me for the last 12 months. So let's get into it. As always, the first book I'm going to start off with is the one from my TBR that I did not finish, and that was Michael Chabon's The Yiddish Policeman's Union. Now, arguably, this is actually my favorite book that I have read this month, and I had a feeling it was going to be, which ultimately is why I left it until the last, because I wanted to sort of bribe myself with a good read by not letting myself read it until I finished the other books in my stack, being the ones I didn't want to read. That backfired on me in that now I'm about to get into the busiest reading month I have had since April, and I'm not going to get to finish this in the short term. I am about to start chapter 10 and I'm on page 82. This book's about 400 pages, just over 400 pages. I'm on page 82, so I'm almost a quarter of the way through, which is kind of startling because I actually didn't realize how slow of a burn this book was, but it is quite slow and it's actually quite introspective. So the Yiddish Policeman's Union centers around essentially a murder mystery. This guy has shown up dead in a hotel, and they need to figure out who killed him, or they think someone killed him. It might have been self-inflicted, probably wasn't. We're gonna see where it goes. In the meantime, we're also 9 weeks away from reversion, which is basically where the US government is going to reclaim the portion of Alaska that was annexed essentially to the Jewish folks who escaped to the United States in the 40s, the 30s and 40s, for reasons I'm sure I don't necessarily need to get into. So it's sort of a race against the clock to figure out this mystery and come to terms with where all of these people are going to go. So all of our main characters are going to get scattered essentially because they are not US citizens, and this is about to become US land. Love the government, love how they keep doing this to people who actually need help and land and a place to stay. But that's just never going to happen, is it? So that's where we're at in this book. The narrative voice is phenomenal. The main character is kind of a deadbeat. I think I mentioned in my vlog somewhere, and I'm not sure if that vlog has gone up yet, but I think I mentioned that the main character kind of has Big Harry Dubois vibes from Disco Elysium, if you have ever played that game or ever seen it played. Disco Elysium absolutely slaps, by the way. It's one of the most, I guess, literary video games I've ever seen. But it's so good. Being mindful of major trigger warnings in that game, but it is a very good game. Harry and our main character Meyer Landsman in this book, I think, have a very similar vibe. So I am truly heartbroken that I can't finish this month, but I have hope that I'm going to get to it soon. I'm planning on doing a month later this year where I'm going to collect a bunch of books that I have yet to finish, and this is probably going to end up in that month because I would really, really like to finish this book. It's so good. Highly recommend it so far. If you've read it, let me know what you think, because honestly, I need to talk to someone about this. Okay, so on to the books that I have read. I'm pleased to say I finished The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. The ending, oh boy. So the chapters leading up to the ending were really good. The ending itself, in my opinion, got super on the nose, super preachy, very much in a tone that was the moral of the story is don't let a man step on your dreams, which yes, absolutely, don't let anybody step on your dreams regardless of their gender, but especially men. But we don't need to spell it out. We don't need to spell it out. Ultimately, this book just fell super flat for me in basically every regard. I don't want to spoil any of it in case you haven't read this. There was like a part about 80% of the way through where two of our characters were running for their lives, basically, and that was the best part of the book. Stakes were high. I cared about what was going on. I wanted to see what was going to happen. And the rest of it just kind of didn't do it for me. Also, I'll put it this way. Only the people that were supposed to die died in this book. Anybody who, you know, may or may not have done anything of their own volition did not die, even though it was implied that they could have. And frankly, I think it would have been better if certain characters, or no, if a certain character died. And I'm not talking about the cheating husband. I'm going to put it that way. There's another character in this book who was potentially going to die who did not. And I think it would have been stronger if that character hadn't been brought back, I guess. I don't know if that's a spoiler. I'm trying to talk around it. Ultimately, this book fell super flat, and I am not going to be rereading this in any capacity. It's probably going to go into my out pile. Truth be told, this was not good. Didn't like this. I want to rate this about a 2.5. Honestly, like, the writing was fine. The ending was so poorly written. Again, it was like extremely preachy. It just wasn't that interesting. Like, there were essentially two timelines. The past timeline was much more interesting than the present timeline. The present timeline was the preachy one, which I didn't like. And I'm just like, there's a million different ways that we could have written this to make it better, and yet we chose not to do that. So, like, I'm never getting the time back that I put into this book, both last year and this year, because again, this was one of my cheat books. I started halfway through at the beginning of this month, and I'm just never getting those hours of my life back. The next book that I actually finished was not one that I was planning to read this month. This one was kind of a surprise. I didn't know that I was going to hyperfixate on this fandom this month, and yet here I am, because mental health issues have abounded this month. So hyperfixation was inevitable. I read the Umbrella Academy Apocalypse Suite. It was a weird ride. I sort of, as someone who started in on the Umbrella Academy fandom with the show, it was difficult for me to separate the show from the book. They are completely different animals, so like it's super hard to not compare and contrast them, honestly. The show, I think, does a better job of going into the individual characters' stories and their psyche and their sort of character arc more all around, whereas this feels more like a superhero comic, and we have characters who are clearly going through it, but we're not really exploring it. It's kind of secondary to the main sort of superhero gig. I feel like not a lot happened in this particular volume, because we tried to shove way too much story into a very small space. Like, I think we're just over 100 pages here. We tried to stuff a lot of shit in here, and I don't think a lot of it got fully realized, except the effect that the family dynamic had on Vanya. Again, disclaimer, as I put in one of my last videos, I am specifically calling the character from the comic Vanya as opposed to Victor from the show, because in the comic Vanya did not transition, and this is absolutely no shade or no criticism about Victor or Elliot Page or any of that, because I honestly think, I'm gonna be real with you, I think that the Umbrella Academy show is better in every single way, and the transition storyline for Victor, while honoring and being in tune with Elliot's own transition, I think is just a much stronger storyline overall. Like, that is art imitating life 100%, but honestly, I think that that is the best storyline they possibly could have come up with. I don't know where they would have gone with that character if Victor hadn't transitioned, to be honest with you. Like, it just makes the most sense for him as a character, and it was just miles and miles better. Vanya is look at the cover, come on. She is so hypersexualized, and like just everything about this was kind of a bit of a drag, to be honest, following the show. I don't know. Also, though, I should probably mention this is probably a product of its time, because I think this first one here was published in about 2009. Sorry, 2007. This was published in 2007. And a lot of things were different in 2007. Treatment of women was not nearly as good as it was now. It wasn't as bad as it has been in years past also, but it certainly wasn't as good as it is now. Not that now is great, I will admit, but it was worse in 2007. So that's where we get the whole Vanya problem from, and like Allison is pretty shallow, and I understand that she only gets shallower throughout the comics, which is a fucking shame, to be honest with you, because again, from the show, Allison is such an interesting character. She's got so much going on, she's got very deep feelings, very deep values. She's just so interesting and so good, and she's just not in here. I don't think any of the characters are particularly intriguing in this, to be honest. I don't really care about any of them. Diego's like a first-class asshat, top to bottom. Absolutely not my jam. Luther's very stereotypical. We don't even learn his name in this, honestly. He's called Spaceboy the whole time. Like, he's the only one whose real name we did not get, aside from Five, but he's got his own problems in that he doesn't have a name, aside from Five. But, like, I guess his character was interesting in that he was, like, a dyed-in-the-wool piece of garbage for a person, which, you know, fair enough. He was dissected by the Temps Commission to become a killer, so, like, he's gonna be a bit of a dick, and that was absolutely played up. So I think he was probably the most well-fleshed-out character, but honestly, everyone just kind of sucked in this. Klaus was kind of boring, which, huge shocker, because Robert Sheehan's rendition of Klaus is the farthest thing from boring. Anyway, I could go on ad nauseum about all the ways that I don't like this in comparison to the show. The art is great. Particular imagery aside, I thought the art was fantastic. And if you're just looking for something to waste a couple of hours on like a superhero comic, this is probably a good way to go. Coming out of it, I'm going to be rating this about a 3. The benefit for this book is that it was not nearly as bad as The Lost Apothecary, and I read them basically at the same time. I think I finished this one the same day, but I finished it first. I think that was how that day... Time is a mess. I don't know what's happening in my own life, but it's fine. I didn't hate this, I just don't feel particularly strongly about it in a positive way, so it's extremely middling, and for me that just doesn't cut it. The next book on the docket is one that I do not have to show you, but here it is. I read A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, and shocker, another flop. That's sort of been the story for July. Everything kind of sucks. This book did not pull me in any way. The characters were edgy for the sake of being edgy. They were just kind of flat, honestly. Like, they felt boring. I didn't care about any of them. I didn't care about what they were doing. I didn't care about their interpersonal connection. Until the end, I really liked how we developed the brotherhood between Kel and Rye. I liked a lot, but that one redeeming feature is not going to be enough to pull me through the rest of this trilogy. The story I truly did not care about. I think she did exactly the same thing with that as she did with Addie LaRue, in that she took a plot that was about this big and stretched it, rather than doing what one could do, is take a plot bunny this big and turn it into a big thing, right? That is exactly the farthest from what she chose to do in that book, and I didn't like it. It was boring, and I was very glad that it was over. I had to force myself to finish it. A, because it was a library book and it needed to go back, and B, I wasn't going to finish it otherwise. I had to push myself. I basically just dissociated on a really hot afternoon and just laid in bed and listened to it until it was done. Won't be finishing that series, Probably will never pick up another V.E. Schwab after this because that's 2 flops, and they were flops for exactly the same reasons. That in being that they were boring and I didn't really care about the characters. So I think I'm done. Just V.E. Schwab can be for everybody else and not for me, and that's fine. I'm going to rate A Darker Shade of Magic 2.5. We could have easily cut that book in half, and it would have had about the same amount of impact. And it would have wasted significantly fewer hours of my time. So, 2.5. The last book of July that I have finished is another one of my cheat books that I'm really glad that I finished because now I never have to touch this again. It's The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. The ending of this book was actually really good. Like, I thought it was strong, I thought it was engaging, and I actually cared about what happened and grieved for the losses that came out of it, which I wasn't expecting. Bananas. This book, however, you can see that it's a bit of a chonker. I think it's 513 pages long. I think this book could have easily come in around 300, maybe 350 pages, and no gravity would have been lost. We could have easily polished this sucker off in significantly fewer pages and just moved on with our lives. This did not need to be this long. It didn't need to be this long-winded. If we had cut out the miscommunication trope from the first 2/3 of the book, it would have been much stronger in basically every way. I don't even know what else to say about this, honestly. Like, it was not a book that I am excited to have read. I don't think that having read it enriched my life in any way. I did read this for a prompt that asked me to read a book with sapphic representation, and that I can say did go off without a hitch. One of our main characters is gay, and she finds herself a lady friend along the way, and that relationship is explored in a way that was satisfying. I'll say that without trying to ruin it for you. And one of sort of who I would frame as one of the main side characters at the end was revealed to be trans. I was not expecting that in any way, and frankly, I'm glad for it. I wish that it had been hinted at a little bit more so I could have picked up on it. However, I was so uninvested in this book that also I may just have skimmed over it. Like, that is an absolute possibility. That may have been a me problem. That said, the last 150 pages I did deeply care about, and I really liked where the book went. I ended the book feeling positively about all 3 of our main characters, about their storylines, and about how things wrapped up. Would I read it again? No. I'm going to put this one at a 3-star because frankly that ending really pulled it up. Otherwise this would have been another 2.5. The ending was very well written. I do not think I'm going to be going back in to read The 10,000 Doors of January, which is Harrow's other book that I know of. I don't know if she's written any others in the interim. I don't think I'll be revisiting this author. I don't like her writing style, and now I'm sort of gun shy that she's going to be using the miscommunication trope in other ways, and I just don't want that in my life. So I'm going to happily put this one away and never revisit it. That's the end of July. It was underwhelming. I feel like I kind of deserved this in a way because I've had a lot of 5-star reads over the last couple of months. And I kind of think I deserved this in a way. Like, I had some bad reads coming, and frankly, I knew this was going to be a bit of a tough month in that I had already picked out in my TBR video 2 cheat books that I was trying to knock off of my DNF list. So I knew it was going to be a bit of a slog. I was hoping that the endings would make up for them, and frankly, for The Once and Future Witches, the ending did make up for the rest of the book. I'm not mad about how that book ended, and honestly, I actually punched out the last 120 pages in a single day, and that is very difficult to get out of me. So the fact that that happened, for me, tells me a lot about how well that book redeemed itself. The Lost Apothecary I had to push for. A Darker Shade of Magic I if I didn't feel like I was accountable to you, I probably would have DNF'd a darker shade of magic. And also, I really wanted to fall in love with V.E. Schwab's writing because everyone else seems to have, but it's just not my bag. I can't do it. It's not what I would consider good. I like something that's got a lot of meat to it, and I find that she is a lot of... If we're going to stick with a food metaphor, I find her writing is a lot of icing and not a lot of cake. Not going to be revisiting V.E. Schwab ever, probably, and that's fine. I'll listen to all of you talk about her in the comments and about their work and how much you love it, and I will love that journey for you, but I will not be joining you on that journey. So that's good, and I'm so mad that I didn't get to finish the Yiddish Policeman's Union. It's so good. I'm gonna try to put a few more chapters behind me tonight before I put it away for the month of August, because August is going to be absolutely bananas, what with Magical Readathon. As always, go follow me on all of my social media at Ink and Fig. Leave a like and a comment down below telling me how your July reading went, and subscribe if you haven't yet. If you're interested, hit the little bell also, because I forgot that that was a thing until someone else mentioned it in a video recently, and I was like, oh yeah, the bell is still a thing. Do all of that good stuff. I will see you. Bye.